Welcome back. You're right here on Call to Reason, and you're with Loveless and Beth. We have a very special guest, Beth, today. From the Urban News Service. She's participating as part of the Call to Reason Urban News Service report. Let's welcome Taylor Gordon.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, How are you, Taylor?
I am wonderful. I'm excited to be here, especially concerning a topic like this.
Well, let's jump right into it. You wrote an article recently about the status of black business in America and how tough it is for them to get capitalization and some of the other challenges they're facing. What was the main thing you learned when you were writing your article?
I think for me, one of the main things I learned is you don't want to believe that a lot of the discrimination and a lot of the challenges that these black entrepreneurs are facing are really coming from rather blatant examples of discrimination. And it's the challenges that these entrepreneurs, these black entrepreneurs mainly, are facing are crippling businesses that have every capability to be extremely successful, and yet nobody seems to be overly concerned. Nobody seems to be specifically addressing these issues in a way that can really boost the black community, boost the growth of small businesses, and really help these entrepreneurs. So it was interesting to see, one, how blatant the discrimination was in a lot of these cases, and then how uninterested a lot of the people who could make change seem to be about it.
Yeah, that's an amazing phenomena, because all it takes is for the right person to actually give a crap, and then we get action. So who in your mind has to start caring for there to be some action?
Honestly, I think there are a lot of players at work who need to start showing some concern and have to start getting concerned. The main player I would discuss right now, well, two actually. I'll say the Small Business Administration, in addition to the banks themselves, have got to be more concerned about what's happening with black entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to these small businesses. Black entrepreneurs are really pivotal right now in the growth of small businesses, and that's really going to be what helps catapult success and growth in the black community. But if the banks are still discriminating against them, if the banks are not willing to help them find the funding and financial resources they need, it's impossible for these entrepreneurs to do what they need to do to help their own communities and grow their own businesses.
As you were doing your research, I think you already answered the question, which is discrimination. As you were researching, is that the reason where you arrived at the reason for there being so few loans given to African-American entrepreneurs?
Definitely, it was a huge part of it. All across the board, I think it's fair to note that after we got hit with this economic recession, the amount of loans all across the board just really dropped off in a way that was very critical. But the people who received the worst blow from that were the black entrepreneurs, because there is a lack of black wealth. There is a lack of generational wealth that can help them recover when there aren't loans for them to receive. So when that happened and the amount of loans altogether dropped off, it had a disproportionate impact on the black community. But then yet again, nobody seemed to be concerned about how much damage had been done because of that.
So let me just jump in real quick and ask, the statistic that you quoted, I just want to make sure it's accurate, because are you telling me that black folks went from roughly getting 8% of the SBA loan guarantees before the recession to less than 2% now? Is that actually real?
Absolutely. Based on the reports that we had, it's absolutely accurate, and it's devastating.
How is that? Did you do any research on how women have been affected too? Have women lost their edge with the SBA as well?
There was a change in how many loans they received. However, it wasn't as drastic as what people saw with the African American community. But there definitely was a change. It pretty much turned into this situation where anybody who wasn't a white male was placed in a worse situation than they were before the recession.
Wow.
So, building on that, at what were there figures available at regarding what rate African Americans were applying for business loans proportionately in comparison to the white business owners, and if they were available, what did that comparison tell you?
The interesting thing with that was Black entrepreneurs were applying for fewer loans than white entrepreneurs, but what was even more interesting, I guess, to me as far as how it impacted the bigger picture was the amount of money that was being granted to them. So even when they were able to receive these loans, the amounts they got approved for were significantly lower than what their white counterparts would get approved for.
Give us an example of that. Can you quantify give us an example of average size loan for a black borrower versus the average size loan for, somebody else, another race or category?
Well, I know for a fact when the black borrowers, they were getting loans that were well below. You're looking at $20,000 loans that their white counterparts were able to get, and they're getting much, 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 much smaller loans that are in the single thousands, like $6,000 loans, and things that really can't sufficiently build or grow a business. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure exactly how accurate those specific numbers are, but what you had happening was Black entrepreneurs would apply to get these loans. Right. They would only get approved for these minuscule amounts that couldn't carry a business.
Right.
So after they got approved for these loans, what would happen is they were unable to create the revenue stream that they needed to pay off these loans. So now they're stuck in a debt that they were never able to work their way out of because of the simple fact that the loan was so small, it wasn't able to create the revenue stream they needed.
Essentially, you need to be able to create, you need to be able to have cash flow mm-hmm. for 6 months to Absolutely. Hold a business afloat. And that during that time frame, they say that's the minimal amount mm-hmm. needed typically to get a business off the ground so that it's bringing in enough income to pay expenses. Mm-hmm. And then, the time period after that is when you're hoping for profit.
Exactly. And
right.
when you don't have enough capital to do that, in addition to the fact that Black entrepreneurs are also already at a disadvantage when it comes to getting angel investors and other sources of capital and other sources of financial stability for their businesses, when you add these problems with the loans on top of that, it really makes it impossible for them to get their footing.
Did you see that if there was predatory lending at hand here as well? Was that a factor in some of these failed loans that they knew it wasn't going to be realistic mm-hmm. for people to pay back, but took them out anyway at higher rates? I mean, what did you find any of that in your investigation?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it was one of the least surprising parts of the report because that's something that's been happening for so long for businesses, for Black homeowners, for minorities all across the board. Predatory lending has been such a huge problem. So unfortunately, it wasn't surprising, but it was interesting to see just how devastating that impact was on these Black entrepreneurs and on these Black-owned businesses. And even the SBA actually ended up pulling and canceling one of their programs because they said the default rate on the loans was just incredibly high. They couldn't continue this program, which was created specifically to help entrepreneurs who were working in low-income communities, which obviously most of the time is going to be a minority entrepreneur. But the very reason they're defaulting on the loans is because of these predatory lending methods that kind of put them in a situation where they have interest rates that are significantly higher than their white counterparts. They have significantly less money to work with. So you set them up for failure and then took away the program that could have helped them had you not have been taking part in these predatory lending practices.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you find by way of pathways? What can we do to turn the corner and create something new in this space that's not working right now?
I think one of the main things that people also hear all the time is taking this Black spending power and putting it back in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
We have to support Black-owned businesses. We have to take the initiative to find them, because unfortunately, without the resources that their other counterparts may have, they don't have the marketing to say, look, we're right here. Even if you look at what happened in Detroit, a group of women actually got together a tour bus that they used to take people to all the different Black-owned businesses in the community.
That's a fantastic idea.
It was wonderful. And once people started to see, there's a Black-owned grocery store down the street, there's a Black-owned boutique over here. Once people got that knowledge, it was easier for them to say, hey, I want to go support this. It's right down the street. I didn't know they were 2 hops and a skip away from my door. But when you have these situations where they can't afford the marketing because they don't have the resources, it's so much more difficult for people to find them and support them.
What about Black business associations? What sort of work are they doing to help people learn about the African American businesses that are owned in their communities? There's got to be a national association, or at least local ones, that do help business owners get more known in their areas?
There's definitely a variety of different efforts, and the one that I say was very innovative to me was a lot of people are turning to the technology route, and that is a very rapidly growing industry right now. But a lot of people are actually trying to get behind funding apps and other types of technological means that will let people know, hey, here's a search engine where you can get on and say, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, this is my address. There's Black-owned businesses here, here, and here, 2 miles away from where you live. So it's interesting to see the way people are now and organizations are trying to invest into this technology route so that people do have an easier way to find these Black-owned businesses. But unfortunately, to me, I feel like a lot of the work is still being done at that grassroots level, like the women in Detroit who put together this tour that they even struggled to get, backing for at first. So it's right now, I think the key players are really the people who are doing this at a grassroots level, the concerned citizens, the concerned consumer who is taking it upon themselves to say, hey, we have to help these people out. They're at a severe disadvantage. And if we could at least find them and put this spending power back into our own communities, we could really make a difference here.
One of the interesting things that's been happening is, they're organizing right now this new Million Man March. I don't know if you've heard about that. Now, I was at the first Million Man March back in '95. I was actually there on the mall. And one of the things I found to be lacking then, and it looks like it's about to be a missed opportunity now, is some dialogue during the whole event about supporting each other's businesses, supporting Black business, creating investment clubs that can help adequately finance good ideas coming out of our community. There wasn't really an emphasis on Black economics and the Black economy. And unless we get to that, in this Million Man March is going to be a big gathering of folks and another missed opportunity. Would you care to comment on that?
I would, and I think a part of the problem is what's happening is, as much as it's important to discuss the growth of minority businesses and helping minority entrepreneurs, what's happening is it's almost diluting the conversation that also needs to happen specifically about Black entrepreneurs and Black-owned businesses. Even when you look at the SBA, their programs have this very wide, broad umbrella where they say we're helping minority business owners, minority businesses. And under that umbrella, you have African Americans, you have Hispanics, it counts certain types of Europeans, women, I think even veterans are included under this umbrella. And so when you look at the amount of Black businesses who face a very unique and very unusual set of very trying circumstances and obstacles, the amount of them who are receiving help and receiving a significant portion of this conversation is so small. And I think we need to realize that while diversity is important, helping minorities is important, but in the midst of that conversation, we can't dilute how much attention needs to be paid specifically to the African American community. They have obstacles that they face that nobody else has to deal with. And until we really take the time and the initiative and be brave enough to say, hey, in the midst of helping minorities, we have to help this community that was pivotal to the founding of this very country, it's going to be impossible to really get the change to happen in that community that we need.
You know, I would say 90% or more of all, 90% or more of all Caucasian wealth in America was gained and gleaned off the backs of black folks. Mm-hmm. Right? You've got these families who've been living off that cotton money since the 1800s, and they've managed to, you know, flip it into other industries and whatnot. But a lot of the foundation of a ton of family wealth in America was built by folks who don't have a voice now.
Absolutely.
And it really angers me when folks start ignoring that reality.
I just wanted to know, like, in terms of it's a political show, so I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on the presidential election. And, you know, right now we have Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. I think that they're the only ones so far who have said that they would support college education being debt-free for students. What do you think about that? And if that were the case, would it change a few things? It would be a nice step in the right direction, maybe.
Absolutely, especially when you look at the small businesses right now. A lot of them are being created by younger entrepreneurs. But what you're having is these entrepreneurs are drowning in student loan debt before you even get off the stage at your own graduation. You are drowning in debt. You have the emails, the phone calls saying, hey, you are this many thousands of dollars in debt. And it becomes impossible to try to grow and create and sustain a business with that type of debt weighing down on you. And then Black students are the ones who graduate with the most debt because there is that lack of generational wealth. And so they have even more of a financial burden and a financial hardship when they're trying to create these businesses. But I think it's easy to say, yes, we need to find a way to have a debt-free college education, but I think it's more difficult ironing out the details. I think that's where it's kind of hard and people are getting tripped up. Because even if you look at earlier, President Barack Obama even, had this idea of free community college. But at the end of the day, while that's a good idea in theory, a diploma from a college, community college, which is what he was advocating for, a degree from a community college doesn't hold weight in the job market today. So how much are you really going to help with getting people into free community college? We need to get these students into the universities, these respected universities, the Ivy Leagues, and figure out how we can allow them, a student who works hard, has demonstrated that, can't afford to go to one of these reputable institutions, and they don't have that educational background that employers are looking for and that they'll need if they want to start their own business. So I think the problem is figuring out how exactly to go about this debt-free education, this debt-free college education in a way that's beneficial to the people who need it the most and beneficial to the low-income students and actually gives them a fighting chance in the job market.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to pick this up on the other side of the break. So y'all hang in here with us. We're going to be back with Taylor Gordon and continue our conversation. You're right here on 87.9 FM The Globe, and you are on Call to Reason. Okay. Do me a favor, reach over there and push that red button on the camera for me.
I got it.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to save tape. That's all.
You good? Ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the camera's on. I'm trying to turn it off until we come back.
Oh, well, by the time I walk back, I should be ready.
Okay.
Ready?
Cool. Thank you.
15 seconds.
All right. welcome on back. You're right here on Call to Reason with Loveless and Beth. We have a wonderful guest in our midst today, Taylor Gordon, writer from the Urban News Service, talking about the uphill battle that Black business owners are facing. Beth, you had another question?
I did. While we were in the break, Taylor had mentioned a study that she ran into as she was doing the research for her article. And I found an article actually about it. Essentially, the study covers how a group of businessmen were treated when they were seeking out loans. 3 of them African American, 3 of them Latino or Hispanic, and then 3 of them white. You want to tell us what happened?
Absolutely. So what they did was they took these businessmen, they dressed them all in similar clothing, they gave them all the same financial background, the same credit history, and they gave them all the same business idea that they would go to these banks and try to get a loan for, and it would be for the same amount, the same business idea, dressed the same way. So the reaction and the treatment that each of these men received was in stark contrast to the people of the other group. So the white businessmen or the white entrepreneurs, they go in, they have a relatively smooth experience. Most of them get approved for the loan, and it's a relatively easy experience, what you would expect to go and get a small business loan. Now, when you look at the Black and the Latino entrepreneurs who went in with the same clothing, same financial background, same business idea, not only were some of them rejected for the loan, those who were approved for the loan received higher interest rates for the loan. Some of them reported that the banks didn't even ask for their name. They didn't hand them a business card. And it was such a different experience. They didn't receive help filling out the applications. There was less willingness to answer questions. And it proved, as I mentioned earlier, just how blatant the discrimination seemed to be. Because here's the same business idea, the same appearance, and the only thing we're really changing here is the color of the skin, and all of a sudden this business idea is seen as a risk. It's all of a sudden too risky to invest in this business because there is a Black or a Latino entrepreneur behind it.
That's actually quite alarming.
It is alarming.
And you say this was just an objective experiment just to see the reaction.
The experiment was conducted by Utah State University, Brigham Young University, and Rutgers. Very
conservative institutions.
Many of those are conservative, but obviously highly respected and well known.
Yeah, well, BYU is definitely super conservative.
It's super conservative.
And you know, it's sad that it takes. Well, I mean, you know, I've always said, and I'm the older I get, the more I'm convinced that until we have, I mean, the only way we're going to have real confronting, authentic dialogue about race and racial disparity in America, unfortunately, is when white folks decide to have that conversation. It's going to take white people to convince white people to face and confront these issues of race and discrimination that we have in this country. So I salute BYU for doing that.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a community to get together and have an honest conversation. And it would be nice to, you know, I think it's wonderful that Rutgers and Utah State and Brigham Young got together to do a study like this. And it takes, for whatever reason, white people have a very hard time coming to grips with the natural privilege that they enjoy, that they really don't want to acknowledge. I think a lot of people, especially with the election of Barack Obama, wanted to just say, you know, racism is over. But we have evidence nearly every day showing that that's not the case. And just because an individual doesn't want to look at it, admit it, examine their own white privilege, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Well, and the sad thing is that all the racial strife that we're seeing right now, you know, President Obama is being blamed for it. They're saying he is the one that is causing all this racial division, as if though the country, everything was fine. There was no, as the old folks I used to grow up around in Alabama, there's no Negro problem here, right? I just don't buy that we had total racial harmony before Barack Obama showed up and stirred up all this.
Well, the incredulous part of
Yes.
anyone who would ever say that is right out of the gate. Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, said our number one mission, is not to, give like a 100-day honeymoon period to our first African American elected president. Our number one mission is to make sure he never gets reelected. It was not his number one mission to do what was best for the Americans, given the fact that we do have a democratically elected new president.
Right, in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression.
Exactly. There were so many things that our elected officials collectively need to be doing for the American people at that time, but Mitch McConnell's revelation after Election Day, what he decided to do was to, day one, start before our president had even been inaugurated. Before that,
Right.
before he even took office, his mission number one was to make sure that he did not come back in 2012.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but you're not fostering a country that doesn't see color by making that mission number one, day one.
And the saddest part about all that is that they completely chose to, pursue that tact for the first 4 years, and they continued with it even after President Obama was reelected at the expense of America. They're so determined that he failed. They're willing to cannibalize and sacrifice the good of the country
Absolutely.
in order to be able to say, "Oh, see, I told you he was the worst president." And they're supposed to. They expect that we're supposed to ignore the fact that their highest priority has been making the black man look bad, as opposed to doing what's in the best interest of America. It's shameful.
It is
what
shameful.
And it's been a sad 7 years in that regard, in the context of what America. But I'm proud of America for rising up and dealing with the economic issues we had to deal with, and I'm proud of our country, black and white, for rolling up our sleeves and working together so that we could emerge from the disaster that President Bush created for us. And I feel sorry for the people who hold the line with Mitch McConnell, because they think somehow they're going to get their country back when President Obama is gone, and they think all of a sudden all the things they consider to be problems in this country are going to go away when President Obama leaves office, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's one of the worst delusions in the history of the country.
It makes me really sad, actually, to read this article. This came out June 3rd, a year ago, June 3rd, 2014. What bothers me is, and I think it's great that it was in the Washington Post, which is a respected, considered to be a national organization, but how much real coverage did this issue get? I mean, we're wall to wall right now with Donald Trump and, whatever nonsense is going on in the presidential election. But I feel a little bit cheated as a person who does their best to be informed in the world. I feel cheated that I don't know about this.
Well, it's one of those reminders of what happens when reality contradicts with what the media wants the narrative to be. It would have been an incredibly uncomfortable discussion to say, hey, did you know that the color of your skin can determine whether or not you are going to be able to successfully fund and grow your own business? It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, and it contradicts the current narrative that is, kind of infesting people's minds, that the real reason, there's failure within the black community when it comes to businesses is that black people aren't spending their money the way they're supposed to, or black entrepreneurs are the ones who are simply unprepared, or that there's something wrong with this group of people.
That there's wrong with their presentation, that they simply are not educated enough, or, they didn't do their research properly before they applied. That's the narrative probably that is getting in the way. But clearly this shows, and the work that you did shows, that that's not what's happening at all.
It's not the
At
case.
all. And I look at my own journey in business, having had to pretty much self finance anything I've ever wanted to do. I was rejected by the SBA for no good reason whatsoever. Of course, all the bankers who looked at my package thought it was extremely bankable and were actually shocked when the SBA wouldn't guarantee the note. But then a friend of mine who happens to be white had no problem doing something comparable. We're here with a black business owner right now. Andre, what's been your experience like? How's it been for you to be a black business owner and have to deal with some of these challenges on your end?
It's absolutely hard. They're not giving out too many loans right now. That's it. I can tell you that. Better have some good relatives with heritage money.
Right. And that's what Taylor has pointed out, that there isn't that black generational wealth to carry.
Absolutely not. Haven't been turned down by the SBA. Actually, I'm glad to say something about them. That's in negotiation right now. So we'll see. So, okay.
Yeah.
As someone who had to work through college myself, I can tell you that when a lot of my peers were graduating from high school and from college, there was a car, there was, a gift of money on the first down payment of a house. There was money possibly for graduate school, and I put myself through school, so I didn't have any of that. And one of the first loans I took out was for a car. And also I didn't have a parent co-sign for it. My loan was crazy. The amount of interest that I was being charged, the percentage of interest. And so I think, while it's predominantly the case in the African American community, I think it's just an issue of being a first generation or a generation that comes out of a situation of poverty where you're at a complete disadvantage. You're at a disadvantage if you're graduating from college, having to buy your own transportation, having to then pay off your student loan, which is also what I did. And so I didn't start my own business until I guess I was 33 years old. But had I had everything done for me the way many of my peers had, I could have probably kicked it right out of the gate and just
close to retirement by now.
Exactly. But it does. It puts you about a decade or 15 years behind your peers.
It does.
And then you get into your 40s, and you have the people who are in the same business as you quickly, like a den of lions, like circle around the older folks and just try and say that you're not relevant anymore. Right. Meanwhile, you're saying, "Hey, I just got here,"
Right. And the problem.
Maybe I should go get injected with Botox so I can fit in a little bit better.
The problem is a lot of us, we, like you said, we 10, 15 year behind the curve. And then by that time, we've got families, we've got kids, we got to start thinking about paying for college. So, our dream is constantly deferred. Mm-hmm. It's like a dream deferred for years and years and years before you can finally, get it together. Because I, like you, did not have that that golden parachute to jump into life with.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Taylor, did you run into any sort of individual stories from specific people where you that it was a story that stuck with you as you were writing and even upon completion of your article?
Absolutely. There was one entrepreneur who she has been running a video production company here in Atlanta for 20 plus years. And she's been successful, very successful. But when I spoke to her, it was to see the passion and the frustration behind this idea of I'm successful, but where I am now, where it took me 20 years to get, it took my counterparts half the time, really even less than half, a fraction of the time to get there because they had this access to capital. They were able to have these angel investors. They were able to get these loans. And here I am, as you guys mentioned, trying to keep a roof over my family's head, trying to keep bread, food on the table, and I'm having to pull from my personal savings. I'm having to pull from the money that should be going to my family or whatever it is I need to handle in a personal sense to keep my business afloat. And even she was discussing the problems now with how the changes to this definition of a minority business is even impacting her as an African American female, because now she is missing out on a lot of those SBA contracts because now there's this vast umbrella of so many additional people who are considered minority businesses. So now she's missing out on contracts, and it's pushing her and other African American entrepreneurs and other women entrepreneurs out of the bubble that was supposed to be created to help empower them. So it's to see her frustration not only with that, but then to realize this is all coming from a system that thrives in a country that my ancestors helped to build.
Right.
And when she started discussing that, it was, mind you, she was a very level-headed, very calm person, but discussing that particular part of the story, I mean, you could hear it in her voice, you could hear the shakiness of the same companies, the same banks that are in existence because of the sacrifice of my ancestors are they're thriving, and here I am struggling when you built your wealth and your success on my ancestors' back. And
Right.
the pain behind that, and the pain behind realizing that still there isn't a significant amount of concern for you. There's not a significant amount of concern for the fact that you have these problems as an African American or even as a minority business owner. We're not concerned, even as we just mentioned, the story about your plights aren't receiving national coverage. We're way more concerned about the fact that Donald Trump said something about Megyn Kelly. And it's why is there not this outrage and this frustration of the fact that on the conservative side, they keep saying, pull up your bootstraps. Black people are responsible for saving their own communities, and that we're the ones who have been kind of getting in our own way. But whenever we're saying, hey, we're creating our own businesses, we're doing exactly what it is you're supposed to do if you want to uplift your own community, and yet here come these, powers that be, for lack of a better word, pushing me back out of what I'm trying to do, leaving me at a disadvantage, and making it difficult for me to do exactly what it is I need to do to get jobs in my community, to help my community, and to, bring more fire to my local economy.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, do what the successful white people are doing. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have what we give to the successful white people.
It's
really, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous is what it is. And, I just find it, to me, it's amazing that here we are in 2015 still having this conversation. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that?
Preparing my Shut the Hell Up segment today, I had that thought. I have that thought many times before I come on the show, that just the idea that we're still having conversations like this today is upsetting. And I think that all of us, with the election of Barack Obama, kind of had some sort of hope. And definitely, I mean, we're seeing incredible things happen that I never probably thought that I would see in my lifetime, like gay marriage, for instance, and female CEOs of companies and African American CEOs of companies, Fortune 500 companies and whatnot. But clearly, there is a lot holding us back.
Yes.
And that's the part that I find difficult to rationalize or to come to terms with when, it just seems that we're having many times, I think, worse conversations than we were 15 and 20 years ago about progress.
Yeah, somehow I believe that the election of Barack Obama has been kind of a double-edged sword for us, because there was a lot of celebration about our progress on the one hand, but then the folks who really can't stand that fact and can't get their brain wrapped around a black man being the leader of the free world, they've been so obstructionist and so visceral about it that it really has changed the tone of the dialogue, and where we could have made a lot of progress with our recovery and a whole lot of other things in America over the last 7 years, it seems like we've had to backtrack and rehash conversations that we thought were settled a generation ago. Yeah.
And it's almost like it's like a punishment. Okay, you can have your progressive African American president, but guess what? We're taking away your right to choose. We're taking away Planned Parenthood. We're taking away your business loans. We're taking away health care and a variety of different things that help the middle class make it in the world. If you can't have both. You can't have a progressive president and have these things in your life. And it seems like a punishment.
Mm-hmm. And even to add to that, the simple fact that it was like, now that you have your progressive president, you have him as a figure, but we are going to block and adamantly block so many of the things that he is trying to do. And that's part of the conversation that also gets left out a lot. The president is not making every decision. He doesn't have the power or the authority to do everything it is he wants to do. So even if you have this progressive president in office, it means nothing if you have a Congress who has seemingly dedicated themselves to blocking everything and making sure that whatever it is he tried to promise you isn't going to happen. And it's done out of a maliciousness, and as we spoke a little bit earlier today off the air, it's not even based in fact. It's just based on, this is my belief, this is how I feel about this president, and therefore I'm going to block whatever it is he wants to do, no matter even if it could help and benefit a lot of people. Even if you look at the Affordable Care Act, this is a blueprint that was introduced quite some time ago. And the fact that all of a sudden it's specifically Obamacare, and this is what Obama created, and it is just, they're trying to create this propaganda that this Affordable Care Act is awful for all these communities, when really it's a blueprint that was created so long ago and nobody had a problem with it.
It is a blueprint, actually, that was created by the Heritage Foundation in response to Hillary Clinton being First Lady and wanting to tackle healthcare back in the 90s.
Right, and it was adopted by Governor Mitt Romney in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
But
it's virtually the same thing.
Yeah, but once it becomes a black man's idea or a woman's idea,
it's an awful idea.
Then it's bad.
Yeah.
And wrong.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the sickness that we need to focus on healing here in America, though. Like the sense of, again, patriarchal white supremacy. It's not even white women that have the leg up. Like they're catching the same kind of hell everybody else is, as far as I can tell.
We're getting ready to discuss this whole situation with Planned Parenthood in a moment, and there are just some elements of that whole debate that are disgusting and sexist and just flat out gross. And this is one of the conversations that I was talking about, when I was preparing for our show today, that I'm like, here it is 15, 20 years later. Why are we still talking about the necessity for women to have access to comprehensive contraception and for kids to have access to comprehensive sexuality education? Why? 20 years later, are people begrudging women because we want insurance to cover our prescription contraceptives? That I can't figure out.
But it's okay for a man to get whatever kind of prescription he needs.
Oh, I'm gonna lay into that pretty good. So,
good, awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Awesome.
I'm gonna get mad.
We're gonna wrap up our interview with Taylor. Taylor, what else should we be aware of, and where should we go from here?
I think one of the main things to be aware of is the fact that there's this awful idea that because slavery and all these things happened so long ago that they're not still impacting us today. And even you see it now with a lot of the conversations that are happening. There's almost this attitude of get over it to the communities
Yes.
who have been oppressed and dealt with these despicable challenges and discrimination for so long.
Yeah, we can remember the Alamo, but we can't remember slavery.
Exactly. And it's disheartening to hear that. It's disheartening to hear somebody say get over it when even if you just look at the Ivy Leagues and the colleges and these universities, they wouldn't even be in existence if it wasn't for the money that came from slavery. And yet these are the same institutions that are disproportionately turning away black students. You built your university on my ancestors' backs, and I can't even attend your university to obtain an education. And I think it's an uncomfortable conversation for people to say, these people are hurting because of, what my ancestors did. And it's uncomfortable for people to want to discuss the fact that something as despicable as slavery is still impacting people today. And it's still something that they share responsibility for, in a sense of we have to do what it takes to undo what has hurt these people for centuries.
Yes, so
I
true.
think that if you ask Native Americans in this country about if what we did hundreds of years ago still impacts their lives today, I bet you can say yes. I bet if you ask India if they are still impacted by the British occupation there, I'm sure they would say absolutely it impacts our everyday life. The idea that even though it happened 200 years ago that we should just forget about it and that, because it wasn't me personally, it was one of my ancestors from a long time ago, somehow we're still not collectively responsible for it when we are reaping the rewards of it still. That's really disingenuous. And it's not even, we can't have a real conversation about it if that's where people still are in their minds.
Yeah, that's actually reality. So, folks, we want to thank Taylor Gordon for coming in and spending some time with us. We look forward to having her back again.